Welcome back to part 2. Well, this is in part 2. I accidentally said it at the end of the video, so this piece just goes on right here. It sets up on top of the linkages and just sits on right like that. In the recoil cover, there's a bolt here. Then remember there's a bolt here. Then there was a bolt all the way in the back here, which I don't feel like walking all the way around the snowblower to show you it. Next there's this metal shield, and like I said, when I told you before, don't need to tighten down that plug yet, so that way you can get that metal shield on. Now I apologize, I did make a mistake. You actually also will have to remove that, disassemble that governor linkage. We'll just lift it up off, just to slide that out underneath there. That's all we got to do. So just reloosen that bolt there and pull it back up. And you can probably hold everything in place there and then just slip this underneath. And we should be good to go. Alright, so that's all situated. See, I'm one of those people. I'm a good mechanic, I'm not going to lie. You can ask any of my friends. Many people know me, I am. But I forget things really freaking quite a bit. Just keep it at that. And that's actually one of my weaknesses, because I remember one time I put a 3.5 Briggs lawnmower engine together and started it up. And one of my buddies told me, he's like, hey, he's like, what's this here? And I look at it, and he's like, oh shit, that's the oil sling. And I'm like, what engine's that? I'm like, oh. So eventually I'm like, shut it off, because it was sitting there running, breaking in right there, and I'm like, no lubrication. So probably the worst mistake I've ever made. But anyways, back to work. So I rebolted the exhaust up, and then there's this little plastic thing that goes inside here. Once I can figure out how I position it, and then bolts up to here. So it sits up right like that, sort of. It'll have a little more space away from the exhaust then. Just like that. So I set the gas tank down on top, and I have a vice grip on there pinching the fuel line because I don't want to drain the gas out really. Take the vice grip off and just pinch that clamp there. Sorry, lighting's kind of poor right here, but pinch that clamp. Probably need a pliers. Oops, hold on. Sorry. I'm trying to manage to hold the camera a little more still. There you go. And it just sets right down on there. And then fuel line rests in between there, like that. And then you have these bolts, which hold on the fuel tank, and the primer line goes right there. That's where your primer line is. And then there's these wires here that go up for the emergency stop. There's also a little 8mm bolt that goes right on the side here to the plastic piece. Don't forget that. But at this point, I think I'm going to fire her up. Sorry. Fire it up and see how she runs. Sorry, the camera's in a really shitty position. So, let's see. Don't have the primer hooked up yet. Gas tank's hooked up. Just turn on the choke. Well, alright, so it started, but I'm glad I didn't put it all back together yet, because as soon as I turn the choke off, the engine cuts out. So that means that the carburetor needs to be cleaned, which I said. I'm not sure if I said yet, but not really sure on how that carburetor is. So we'll do that. So I think I'll make one more part after this. I'm going to clean that carburetor. So pinch the fuel line, and underneath here there's a little nut that you can remove the bowl off of. You know, one thing I noticed, this engine does not have a fuel shut-off on, and a snowblower especially should have a fuel shut-off on. That's kind of messed up. I definitely wouldn't design it like that. These things probably have a hell of a lot of carburetor problems. This carburetor looks pretty clean. A few pieces of dirt inside there. We'll blow that out and stuff. But this is usually what the biggest problem with small engines are. The jets usually get clogged up, so I'll blow that out with compressed air. Alright, so it runs, but it surges a little bit, and I think the problem is, the main jet's clear and everything, but I think the problem is something with the float. It's not allowing enough fuel to come in at the proper amount of time. It's not filling up the carb bowl enough. Because I just tried it out now, and I was trying to float, and it was shutting off at like 3/4 instead of halfway where it's supposed to be shutting off at to fuel at. So I'll talk to the guy about that. For now, I'm going to put it all back together and even put the shrouds back on and stuff, and see if he wants to rebuild it or replace the carburetor. But it definitely needs to get rebuilt at least, because that float's shutting off too soon. So the carb's clean, it just has something wrong with it. And I actually do think that he said that he had someone work on it before, so maybe they did something or something. Because, you know, not all people know what they're really doing, and they just take these things apart and just clean them and spray a shit ton of carb cleaner and the gasket swells. Then never use carb cleaner with those gaskets around there. Always make sure the carb's stripped all the way down to the block. But people don't do that, and they wind up doing more damage than it was already done. Alright, so next the primer line went on, and then these two wires just hook up to there. It doesn't matter the order that these wires hook up in, because it's just a switch. Well, it's all back together. Shrouds are all on. Everything's back together pretty much now. I just need to put the cover on for the belts. It does, oh, oops, a final touch. Trying to locate where that latches into. There we go. Well, I'm going to talk to the guy, see if he wants to rebuild or replace this carburetor, because I really don't want to rebuild it because I'm not going to trust it, but if that's what he wants to do, because carburetors aren't necessarily cheap, so, but it does run with the choke all the way from closed to like one notch over. You're obviously not going to get good power and good performance out of that. But it's got a new head gasket in it, which wasn't expensive. So besides labor, it's really all he owes me for. So we'll see what he wants to do.